Now let's continue our list on all the stable elements ranked from worst to best. This is the last part, and this is now the top 10. And please note that my favorite elements that I listed in the video I made about 3 months ago are going to appear on here as well. But, of course, that was 3 months ago, so this is going to be a different arrangement. This is the updated version. At number 10 is terbium. This is my second favorite rare earth metal, and it, in my opinion, has some of the coolest textures out of any of the metals. It's not number one coolest textures, but still, it's really cool because it has a slight brown tint to it, and it looks like any kind of metal. But like, the thing I wanted to tell you guys is that even though it looks a lot like iron and feels like iron, it's still very expensive. Like, I'd say about 900 times more so than iron, because iron costs about $5 per kilogram, and terbium costs about $3,500 a kilogram, somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000 a kilogram. So that's about 600 times more than iron, maybe up to about 1,000 times more than iron. So that's one thing you can tell people, that the reason why it costs that much money, because it's very difficult to extract. And it's also rarer than the other rare earth metals, even though it's not that rare in the Earth's crust. Anyway, there's terbium. Number 9, rhodium, the most expensive metal that you're able to buy. And I was able to afford just a tiny little piece of this metal, and I think it's pretty cool to have. I think it's very cool to have because you can tell people that this piece of metal looks like it's not part of anything, like it looks like something worthless, but it is worth $35. That is how expensive rhodium is. And in my opinion, it's probably the most beautiful metal on the periodic table in terms of the stable elements, because it is very resistant to oxidation. Yeah, it remains completely white in oxygen and does not get affected by it at all. And in comparison to other metals, rhodium has a very slightly rose tint to it. But that's really only obvious when you compare it to other precious metals. And it's very hard, and it's quite literally one of the most difficult metals to work with, and also one of the rarest too. And it also plays a pretty good role in catalytic converters, and that explains a lot why it's so expensive. So you can say a lot about this metal, and also because it's a nice sample and fun to shake around too. I think it's pretty cool to have for that reason. Number 8, osmium. Another one of a lot of people's favorite metals that are precious. And it's the densest naturally occurring metal. And it's so dense that a basketball-sized sphere would weigh over 350 pounds. And just this tiny little ball bearing in my hands I'm holding right now feels pretty heavy. Well, I just lost it. Right, there it is. It feels quite heavy. But the cool thing about this metal is its blue color as well. When you compare it next to other metals like rhodium, which I talked about on the last part, you can see a clear difference in color between these two metals. And the thing that makes osmium not my favorite precious metal is the very high risk of significant price increases in the future. Because I've heard that as more people find out about osmium, because it's the rarest out of all the precious metals, not including rhenium, of course, because it's not in the platinum group, and it's less expensive and easier to acquire. Osmium, however, is expected to shoot up in price a whole lot in the future because there's not a lot of it out there, and it's literally the rarest out of the precious metals and quite possibly the most difficult one to work with. Number 7, thulium. This is a metal that has probably the most interesting textures out of all of the metals that are stable, and also out of all the metals in the periodic table. Just look at all of these weird forms it takes. And it's just beautiful because it doesn't oxidize as easily as the other rare earth metals do. And as you can see, it likes to form these weird dendritic structures. And check out the sound it makes too. That's pretty cool. And I like this metal so much that I actually bought 100 grams of it for $215. And that, of course, is indeed the most expensive sample in my collection. So, you're looking at about $240 worth of this metal. Well, I actually paid a pretty good price for it. It could have costed over $300, but I somehow got a good deal for it. Number 6, ruthenium, the last of the precious metals on this list. Well, the reason why it's not osmium, because I told you before, because the price of osmium is expected to increase a whole lot in the future. At least it could make me some money, but it's still the densest metal, and it's still, yeah, you know what I'm getting at, right? There's a lot of properties of osmium that I enjoy, and I don't want its price to go up, so I'm less able to afford it. But ruthenium, on the other hand, is a different story, because the reason why this is the cheapest precious metal is because it is actually easier to acquire than the other precious metals. And that's a good thing for me, because in my opinion, it actually looks very beautiful. It looks equally as pretty as rhodium in my opinion, but rhodium has a more pinkish tint to it, which makes it a little bit more pretty, but still, ruthenium is really cool. It's a really cool looking metal that a lot of people is going to buy. And it's very difficult to work with too. This bar was $90, even though it costs about $40 per gram. I'm pretty sure it's because of the difficult process needed in getting these edges in this bar, also because it's small. Very hard too, and brittle as well. Now we're down to the top 5. At number 5 is cesium. Funny enough, its atomic number is 55, despite being number 5 on this list. And you can imagine why it's here, because look at this gold metal. It likes to form these crystals in here once you melt it, and then it solidifies. And once you do melt it, it looks like it's flowing like liquid gold in here. But the price of cesium is comparable to gold. That is because it's a very difficult metal to keep shiny without oxidation. And there's a very small sales market for cesium. So there's not a lot of people that are making this metal either. So that explains a lot why it's so expensive. And it's also the softest metal in the world. It's so soft that you can literally squeeze it between your fingers and literally roll it out like Play-Doh. It's even softer than butter. It's absolutely crazy. And it's so reactive that if you leave it out in open air for 2 seconds or so, it will immediately lose its luster, and then it will melt and potentially self-ignite after a couple more seconds or so. So, that is why you'll probably have most difficulty calling cesium a metal out of all the metals. So, it's at number 5. Number 4, germanium, which in my opinion is probably the coolest element, the coolest looking element in my opinion, because look at this nice greenish yellow tint it has. And it also looks like a metal and feels like a metal, but you can see that huge chip right here. That indicates that it's very brittle, like very, very brittle. Because if you drop it on the road or something, then it will shatter like glass. As you can see, this thing has received a lot of damage over the years. I didn't mean to say over the years. I've only had it for like 9 months or so. And during those 9 months, this is the damage it took. It's not enough that it destroyed the whole cube, but still you can see the beautiful crystal structure underneath. It's pretty cool. It's literally like a mirror cube. And one thing I need to tell you guys is my favorite property of germanium, and that is one that's pretty weird, is that it's transparent to infrared light. That is pretty cool, because if you look at this with an infrared camera or a thermal camera, it will be completely see-through. That is crazy. But the thing that does not get germanium to be in third place on this list is the fact that you just can't find it. I believe that's because China has restricted exports on this element. And I think you just can't really find a sample of it that you would be satisfied with, because normally it's available as crushed up bits, which obviously has nothing to do with that. It's like osmium, because osmium is more commonly available in the powdered form. Same thing goes with germanium. Number 3, indium. This is pretty much the metal that got me interested in the periodic table. It's literally the first weird metal that I've heard about, because even though you may not be able to bend it, but you'll notice right away that it's very soft, like extremely soft. It's so soft that you could literally you could chew it like gum. But obviously I don't recommend chewing it, because it's literally a metal and there's no purpose of it. Also because if you have braces like me, it's bad for your teeth. But I can show you how soft it is by trying to poke it with my finger. And look how easily it does that. That was from my finger. And I can try taking this part, which is a little bit thinner. I'm going to try bending it. Yeah, it's just super bendy. And I can even try cutting it. And this is what I get. It's very easy to cut. Number 2, tungsten. This is the more affordable version of the precious metals, because you can feel the density as if you were holding a block of gold in your hands. And it's so heavy that a 4x4 inch cube of tungsten would weigh 42 pounds. That's a whole lot of pounds and weight that you're putting onto your hands. And just this thing by itself would probably be very dangerous if you were to throw it at someone, so don't do it. But it's still really fun to hold. Also because it's the strongest metal and has the highest melting point out of all the metals. All those factors make tungsten my favorite metal. The next element that is my favorite element will not be a metal. This one's my favorite metal. In fact, it actually used to be my favorite element until bromine surpassed it. Which brings us to this. Number 1, so you guess what it is. Right answer, it's bromine. Look at this. It's beautiful. And it looks almost like soy sauce. And it would be fun to drink if it weren't so dangerous. But actually it wouldn't be, because bromine tastes horrible. It smells horrible too. That's how I got its name. Because look at this gas it's giving off. It looks slightly orange. Actually, yeah, it's a reddish orange liquid, and its gas looks the same. It's a little bit lighter though, because yeah, the liquid's more concentrated, and I can shake this back and forth. And it's so corrosive that it stains this glass ampule with this dark red color. And if you let it sit for a while, it's going to start settling back down, and the vapor is going to calm down. But because of that, and you can see how this thing is flowing like water, and you can see something that's this dangerous just flow casually, it's really cool to see. Yeah, and its chemical properties are very interesting too. And this weird color and all these factors make bromine my #1 favorite element, and also the best one in the periodic table, in my opinion.